Hello and welcome back to the Black Comics Universe live event hosted by Peak Game Comics, the digital store supporting creators of color, and the newly launched streaming platform, The Experience. I am Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. Y'all, okay, if I'm not mistaken, this is the last panel of the day, and this is the one. Like this is like everything that has gone on before has been a great intro, a great build up to get y'all hyped, get y'all ready for this conversation. Oh my God, I'm so hyped. I'm so amped up. It's ridiculous. It's an absolute honor. If Experience was currency, he'd be one of the wealthiest men in comics. Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for Mr. Joe Illidge. Come on. Hello.
Hey, everyone. Victor, pleasure to be here with you.
Sir. No, the pleasure is absolutely mine. First and foremost, though, because I know that, 2020 and COVID was crazy. You, sir, were directly afflicted. How are you doing?
Thank you. My wife and I are in good health.
Good.
And, we just continue to really try to live a healthy lifestyle, try to exercise more, take a lot of natural supplements, take the proper precautions.
Mm-hmm.
But, listen, we're still here and a lot of people are not. So all I can do is be thankful and grateful.
100%. Wow, sir, I meant what I said. When it comes to Experience, yours is the name. Okay, like I don't know, if there's a company that you haven't worked for, it's because they haven't been invented yet. and you are literally the man who's been in the rooms where they happen. But I want to go back to the beginning. When
Great.
Did you first get into comics as a fan?
Wow, so right now I live in Brooklyn, New York, and interestingly enough, I live a few blocks away from the newsstand where it's on the corner of Church and Nostrand Avenues. At that time, when I was a kid in the second grade, it was called Tiamo.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom, every Friday after work, we had a tradition. We would go to the newsstand and she would buy herself soap opera magazines and she would buy me comic books. And so she would buy me 3 or 4 different comic books. And back in those days, I was a real DC head,
Word.
Right? And so I've been reading comics, since I know.
Love it.
And I have family in Nassau, Bahamas. So I used to go there every summer. And my aunt, one day, she brought me 6 comic books, which was basically like 2 weeks worth of like newsstand visits with my mom.
Right.
And one of them was Uncanny X-Men 112. And, if you're a Black kid, like once you encounter the X-Men,
yes,
there's no turning back. And I became a Marvel kid from that point.
Wow.
That X-Men was it.
Okay.
Right. And when I was a kid, like real talk, people were saying like DC stood for dumb comics. I swear, right?
Disrespectful.
So,
Hold up.
I know. So like I said, I would go back and forth between the companies, but really it's been with me all my life.
That's amazing. And I love that. And again, your story career shows that you have the love of the medium as a whole. Did you always know what you wanted to do in comics, or has that perception kind of changed? Did you start off, wanting to do artwork, wanting to write? Where did you start with that side?
I've been drawing ever since I was a kid. 2 of my favorite artists growing up were George Perez and John Byrne. Yes. So I did have the original ambition to be a comic book artist. I went to both the High School of Art and Design and School of Visual Arts here in New York. And I have the ability to draw from observation, but not from imagination. And after I graduated out of college, I had a really sobering conversation with a friend. And he made me realize that I did not have a future as an artist. But what I did love was the word and the power of word and the power of story. So at that point, my ambitions went toward the interest of the art of the story.
See, now I definitely connect with that. As Danny J. Quick is bringing up, like, you're an artist too. This is one of those things where we're 2 men that are known for the word side. Yes, we can push a pencil if we wanted to, But the way that we can use words is so much more important, and I totally understand that. How has your visual acumen affected how well you use your words? Is that a regular process? Do you speak well to artists because of it?
Yes, growing up with an artistic background gave me the ability to speak to artists in their language.
100%.
And actually growing up in, high school and college with friends who became icons in the comic book industry, right? And friendships that I still have to this day, whether it's Chris Cross, who's like a brother to me and a veteran milestone, the Seminole Blood Syndicate artist, or Chris Batista, who was the artist of the Steel series that Louise Simonson wrote. So having that artistic background definitely made me a better editor and a better participant in the comic book industry, or a more informed participant. And as a writer and editor, I have some kind of an understanding of what artists are doing. I don't live the life of an artist, but having friends who are artists and knowing that language helps me in communication.
100%. Okay, so for those people that are watching and may not really understand the difference, what is the difference between an editor and a writer? Because that's such a very, severe distinction, but it's one that most people have no idea.
Wow. Okay, so I would really have to try to break that down, because that question could literally be an entire episode, right? The writers are the people who create and develop the narratives. And they're the ones that have to face the blank screen, the blank piece of paper, and find their muse. They're the ones who constantly practice their art in utilizing our beautiful language to tell narratives, right? The editor has a variety of jobs, but insofar as working with creators, there are three primary jobs. One is working with creators to maintain a level of quality in a timely fashion. Secondly, to be a form of support, because what a lot of people don't think about when they buy these comic books and graphic novels is that artists live mostly solitary lives. So this kind of life that we're living because of the pandemic, that's what artists have been doing for decades. They have been at home at the table, and when we're out in corporate America and we're talking at the water cooler about the latest MCU film, they're home at the table doing the work. So the editor is a kind of support partner in that way. And the third thing, which is really crucial, is the editor's job is to elevate the creators. The editor's job is to be a partner and ally to the creators to make them the best creators that they can be, whether it's a writer, a penciler, inker, colorist, letterer, because every participant is a storyteller. And we're there to be the support and to provide positive reinforcement and to have honest conversations, honest dialogues about the world, about the story, and things of that nature. So the editor is the last person in the line. The creators are always first.
Well said. Very well said. And I think that is definitely something that so few people fully understand. And so the relationship, they don't really know how to cultivate, work within, or anything like that. In a lot of ways, you sound like a parent. You're a parent that has to gird your grown children to make sure that they can handle what they're supposed to do, but still give them the room to do it, but still make sure that they do it well.
Well, that's an interesting analogy, because another way in which an editor is a parent is if you're working for a company, right, and you're dealing with corporate-owned intellectual properties, you're a caretaker, right? So it's funny when I talk on Twitter and I'll say something like, oh, Cassandra Cain is my niece. I consider myself one of her early uncles because I was there when Cassie was born. And so my job is to take care of Cassie, right, as an idea, so that she can be in enough good health that you can pass the baton for someone else to take care of her. So in that way, the ideas are children too.
Right.
And so for a time, you are a parent.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so walk us through where you went from being a fan to a practitioner of comics. What was that like? What was the environment like, and how has that changed in the years since?
Sure. So, my big change came, it was early 1993.
Mm-hmm.
I was unemployed. It was a time in which I did not have purpose. And I walked into a newsstand and I saw, you see all the Marvel and DC comics, of course. And then I saw this one comic called Icon,
Mm-hmm.
and it was Icon #2. And it had Icon and Rocket, and they were fighting these SWAT cops, and it had the line, "Stop, do not hop on cop." And that moment changed my life. That validation changed my perception of what was possible because, I grew up in the 80s and the 70s,
Right.
and being a Black geek, that was not good.
Say that again. Come on now, say it again, because you earned that, baby. Come on.
Real man. I had my friends in high school say, "Joe, there's no way you're going to get any sex if you keep talking about these comic books." Like, seriously, right? It wasn't fun. I would have to go home on a train, and I would have to hide my comic books in my math books. Okay? God bless us that we're now in a world in which everyone knows the name Thanos, but that's not what it was like for me growing up. So Icon was a validation of my geek life. And so, when I went to apply for an internship, I met Dwayne McDuffie, who didn't hardly say anything in the interview, making him even more mythic. And Matt Wayne, who was an editor there, who did most of the talking. My friend Jason Scott Jones, who's now a television producer, he was an intern, and he had told me about the internship. But in those days, I didn't believe in working for free. So I was like, that's not a proposition that I can subscribe to. But when I saw Icon, I knew that history was going to be made by the publisher of Icon. And I wanted to be there, right? I wanted purpose. And I blew the interview to hell, bro. Because, I grew up with comic books. So, like, I had a chip on both shoulders, rolling up into the Milestone offices, right? But then Jason, stood up for me and said, I think he'll be a good fit. They gave me a shot. And I worked there for 3 months. And it was amazing. It was like a staff of people of color, people from different backgrounds, women, men, a company owned by 4 Black men, with this universe of stories that spoke to our life, right? And that's when it became real,
right?
Like this is possible, yeah. And so after 3 months, because in those days, the New York transit system wasn't a 2-fare zone; it was a 1-fare zone. You didn't have a Metro card allowing you to transfer, right? So I was losing money every day I was going to Milestone because I lived in a 2-fare zone, yeah. And but for the experience, it was worth it. But then, after 3 months, I went to the office of Derek Dingle, the president, and I said, "Listen, I'm really grateful for everything that you all have done for me here and what I've learned, but I've got to go back out in the world and try to get a job." And he said he understood. And I went to lunch, and I came back, and he offered me a part-time job.
That's awesome.
And that was the beginning.
Oh my God. Listen, that is such the perfect story of being the fan to elevate into the practitioner and to recognize that there was history being made. The biggest thing that immediately comes to my mind with that is, at what point did you realize that you were a part of that history being made? Not as an observer, but an actual hand in it. What was it that you did where you go, "Oh snap, I'm a part of this now"?
It's wild. It's being at Milestone and the experiences there. I remember the day that Quincy Jones came to visit the offices. And Quincy Jones is physically shorter than me, but obviously he is a giant
Of course.
in our society, right? In what we call humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And meeting him and shaking his hand, I knew then that this was something truly special that was going to make a difference. And even you, but the thing is, at the time,
Mm-hmm.
you don't see forward 20 years. You don't know.
Right.
So I didn't know there was going to be a Static Shock cartoon that was going to change the lives of 2 generations of people.
Right.
You know, I didn't know I would ever get to work on Batman, but I did. I was the first Black editor in the Batman editorial department,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, it was the work. It was all about the work. But I'll tell you a moment that I had. It was New York Comic Con 2016
Mm-hmm.
and October, and I was a member of Lion Forge, and we had a big panel, and I was on the stage with Desiree Rodriguez, who was the assistant editor, and we officially announced the Catalyst Prime imprint.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, this guy came up to me in the audience, from the audience, and he drew a picture of the Cassandra Cain Batgirl, and he said, "This is for you." He said, because this was the first character in which I saw myself. This was the first character that made an impact on me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way I could have known in 1999, working on No Man's Land,
Right.
that 2 decades later, I was going to meet a young man who was going to say something like that to me. I have had conversations with people who are artisans in entertainment. I had someone say to me, Static changed the direction of me and my brother's life.
Wow.
And that's touching. It's really
Yes, of
touching.
course.
And it's an honor to have been a part of that.
Absolutely. And I think you've wielded that responsibility very well. You are accessible, which is not necessarily something that other, we'll call them innovators of other industries, particularly people of color, have maintained. You have allowed people to not only see your moves within the industry, but then be able to ask you about it. Like, how did you do this? Or why did you do this? What was it that let you know that was the move to make, not to remain mysterious, but to be as forthcoming with your cookbook so that others can grow?
Wow, that's a really good question, and really thank you for your kind words. I think it was when we were developing Catalyst Prime, and when I was working with all the creators and developing the line,
Mm-hmm.
and I came back to comics because Dwayne McDuffie died.
Mm-hmm.
And after I mourned him, I knew that the comic book industry, or the American comic book industry, was just going to close up around the vacuum of his death,
Right.
and not continue the work of Milestone to the degree that Milestone did.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was going to happen. I saw it happening. So I realized that I had the responsibility to come back to comics and continue his work. And so when Catalyst Prime was being developed, I realized that in working at Lion Forge and this company of memes with these great people, that in addition to our mission, in addition to this line of books and the amazing creators behind it, there needed to be a voice. The same way Stan Lee was the voice of Marvel. There
Mm-hmm.
needed to be someone that people could talk to, right? And so I made the decision to take that responsibility, because without communication, how are we gonna lift each other up?
Right.
If I don't communicate with people, then how can I pass on what the Milestone founders passed on to me when they gave me a chance?
Of course.
So it doesn't behoove the mission for me to be a recluse.
Thank you for that. Like seriously, and there's lots of comments that I'm seeing of people co-signing that whole concept. People calling you Uncle Joe because again, that openness is the necessity. Okay, so not everything can be, roses and wine.
Sure.
What were some of your biggest challenges that you've overcome in your career so far?
Wow. I think I would speak about failure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we talk about failure and what that means, you know, when we look at careers from the outside, we see movement.
Mm-hmm.
We don't understand the reality that has happened behind the scenes. And I've been at various publishers
Mm-hmm.
and I've had longer tenures at some than others, more successful tenures in some than others. And the most important thing was to remain grateful, to, in times of doubt, be able to look at what I've accomplished
Mm-hmm.
and to realize that the mission continues and the mission is bigger than me. So if I'm someplace for 9 months, is it the time or is it the impact?
Yes.
Right. And so it's taking the lessons from wherever you've been, walking forward with it, making yourself a better person, um, and trying to make yourself a better advocate. Right. So the reality is we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes.
So true.
And when we overcome them in private to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But, I remember I wrote a editorial for the Hollywood Reporter after the end of my tenure at Valiant. And what that was about was that the future of comics is a bright and brilliant thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very exciting time, right? And people didn't know what to do with that. They were like, wow, you're not like dumping on Valiant? Like, you're not angry? And it's like, that's not what this is about,
Right.
right? This is about the future ahead,
Right.
right? And honestly, there's so much negativity in our industry,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's through business practices in transition, whether it's through toxic narratives on social media, that we must counter that with positive, that we must keep our eyes on the prize.
That right there is literal experience talking, y'all. So I need y'all to write that down, heed what he's telling you. Because again, it is always looking at that there is something brighter down the road. Just relax. It sucks. And it's not to say that you're not without ill will on different people, different actions, but when to voice them and when not to. That is absolute wisdom, and I love that. Okay, so when it goes to you being the first Black editor in the Batman office, one of the things that my recollection of that time period was that you were never forced to create Blackness for the sake of, but just quality content. Was that ever something that you had to assert, or was that the understanding that you were good at your craft and that is why they hired you?
I was hired because I was good at my craft.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that there weren't people on the floor that doubted that. And I remember there was a time where I was talking to two colleagues, one of whom was a senior editor,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking about comic book covers. And I mentioned the idea that a white background on a cover allows whatever you put on that cover to come forth stronger. And the senior editor gave me a look like he was surprised that this observation was coming out of my mouth. But what he did not understand is that I was a student of Dwayne McDuffie,
Mm-hmm.
who's one of the best editors that ever hit the American comic book industry. So I'm walking in there with knowledge. And listen, this is corporate America. So you are being put into positions on a regular basis where you have to prove yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You are encountering racism that is both overt and insidious,
Mm-hmm.
but you have to do the work. You have to do quality work. And so that's what I was focused on. The quality work, the representation of people within the books. And listen, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I did position myself to be a kind of sojourner truth in DC Comics, and I brought talented Black people into the Bat office, right? And they were talented, right? So that whenever anybody looked at their work, they could not question the talent. And if they did question the talent, then that was about a different kind of a subtext.
Yep.
Right? So that's the thing. Quality endures. That's something that a friend of mine, Irene Bradish, told me. She said, gimmicks don't last, quality endures. I never forgot that.
That is well said. Very well said. So with that in mind, is there a project that stands out as something that you are the most proud of?
Wow.
I mean, that's right. Pick between the babies. Choose between the babies. What are we going to do?
Picking your children. I will. Okay, so there's two that come to mind immediately. I am very proud of the Catalyst Prime line.
As well you should be.
You know, in a historical sense, we kept the seat warm for the relaunch of Milestone. In a spiritual sense, it was the 21st century successor of the 20th century iteration of Milestone. It gave the world new heroes. It was an imprint of quality. It reflected our world, and it allowed a lot of people to be paid to do stellar work, right? And it was something that a lot of people considered impossible, but we did it, right? And now it's in Gail Simone's hands. So again, it's kind of like Cassie Kane, right? You take care of them, you nurture them, you pass them on, and hopefully they grow. So I'm very proud of that. And I'm very proud of my run as an editor on the Birds of Prey title. Those characters, Babs and Dinah, really became important to me. Babs, Barbara Gordon being this intellectual, humane person who's a wheelchair user. A wheelchair user and a martial artist.
That's right.
She was trained by Richard Dragon and is expertly adept at using eskrima sticks. And, Dinah Lance, the daughter of the first Black Canary, someone who every morning she gets up and she's dedicated to saving life, right? So those two experiences are experiences that I would say are kind of like shining stars in my career at this point.
I definitely agree with that. And I love that in that regard, some of it is newer work, some of it is older work. There's been tons of things in between, but I love that there's that expanse there. And with that in mind, is there a place where if you could go back retrospectively, you would have done something different and you know what it is that you would have done? Anywhere in your career, 1, 2 things, what have you?
There are a number of things, right? But here's 2 truths, right? Number 1, I believe that we will never develop time travel technology because if we get that technology, we're going to destroy the human experience as we understand it. We evolve through our mistakes. We evolve because we don't get to go back. You've got to own that. And what are you going to do with it? Are you going to own it and be a better person? If you get to erase it, then you don't have to own it, right? So that's one. And number 2, what I've discovered is sometimes what seems like a bad thing is a windfall in disguise, right? So sometimes you think, oh, if I had made that decision, I would have ended up there. But then 15 years later, you find out, oh man, I dodged a bullet by not being there. There are bullets that fly for decades. and you dodge them because you went left when you thought you should have went right. So in that regard, I don't want to take back anything. I want to own everything because that is how I become a better participant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The work that you've done in the mainstream market has informed what is really possible in the Black independent market. I am a bastion of that. How do you see where that has progressed over, we'll say, the last 10 years of Black indie comics, and how successful they have been from other iterations of Black indie comics, and where do you think it can go from here in the immediate future?
Part of the evolution I've seen in Black independent comics is they're not necessarily reactions to the existing system,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not necessarily my version of that character.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing absolutely original ideas, or you're seeing ideas based on our history. You know, a perfect example is Tuskegee Heirs. Tuskegee Heirs is not ripping off anything from
Right.
Marvel and DC Comics. It's using our history to inform a speculative future for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of evolution I've seen. You know, someone who came before me in this excellent experience, the Queen of Fua Richardson, and her getting to put
Mm-hmm.
out the Book of Myrrh. That's coming from a deeply personal experience of lineage,
Yes.
of history, right? So that is part of what I've seen. And in terms of how we're going forward, you only have to look at how Kickstarter and the Black indie community
Mm-hmm.
has really shown Black entrepreneurs that there is another way to get their books to the audience. That if an organization decides that they don't have the selling power to be part of that track, there are other tracks. The fact that Roy Akupe doing the work
Mm-hmm.
was recognized by Dark Horse, and after 2 years of negotiations made a historic deal, which is basically the 21st century version of the Milestone deal,
Right.
as
Right.
Milestone was a creative company that had a publishing deal with DC Comics,
Mm-hmm.
and now Unique Studios is a creative company that has a publishing deal with Dark Horse. These kinds of things show the viability and the growth and the evolution of the Black independent movement. And it's an amazing thing to see,
That's
right?
awesome.
Like, this is a great time to be alive.
Yes,
and,
indeed.
and
Yes,
and
indeed.
and be a creator and be in comic books,
Of course. Of
right?
course. So, is there any intention from you to launch a creator owned anything, whether that's an imprint, a specific title? Is that something that you're looking at?
100%.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
100%. There
Everybody's
is a
excited for that.
graphic novel in development now at First Second,
Okay.
co-written and co-developed by myself and Sean Marnbro, which takes place during the Harlem Renaissance. We've seen some of the art for that. It looks absolutely amazing.
Awesome.
So that will be out at some point in the future, and it will really be a testament to the tenacity
Mm-hmm.
of Black people and the power of the art that we create, right?
I love that.
There are various people that I'm speaking to about developing creator-owned projects.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I'll be looking at as well. And one thing that I'll try to do is not replicate what has been done, to
Mm-hmm.
see if somehow I can contribute something that is a distinctive contributor, right?
I like that.
Like, you know, someone has asked me, hey, do you want to create your own superhero universe? And the answer is no, I don't want to create my own superhero universe.
Right.
I do want to create some stories that, after this is all said and done, and I'm gone from the industry, or I'm gone from this mortal coil, that can still impact someone positively.
Wonderful. I do think that your start to that is right over your shoulder. There's this beautiful little book here. If we can talk about that guidebook. Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah,
little,
yeah, yeah.
little access guide there.
Let's
You know,
talk
another
about
little
this.
baby there.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this, because what you are doing is, again, using your voice, which is phenomenal and loud. Okay, that's so important, to shed light on others. What inspired that?
So, I have two local comic book stores here. I'm equidistant between both of them. One is Bulletproof Comics
Mhm.
by the Flatbush Junction. The other one is Anyone Comics. Anyone Comics has been around for 4 years. The owner is a friend of mine. His name is Demetrios Fragiskatos. And one time we were Facebook DMing, and he just said, "Hey, I got this crazy idea. What would you think about a green book for comics?"
Come on, that's
and I
awesome.
was like, "Tell me more.
Right?
Let's go. I'm in. I'm in." And so then we had lunch one day, like a month later, and he was inspired by, the Safe Negro Travel Guide in
Mhm.
Lovecraft Country, which
Mhm.
is of course inspired, by the Negro Motorist
Right?
Travel Guide, that helped people like us stay alive and navigate during the Jim Crow era.
Mhm.
And he wanted to bridge the gap between the consumer and the comic book industry.
Mhm.
There are so many people that want the stories that the community are making, but they don't know that the distance between them and the stories is this.
Exactly.
So they needed something to be the gateway. For myself, on top of that, there was an aspect of the safe space,
Mhm.
right? If we're talking about the analogy to the travel guide, I remember when I worked at Lion Forge and we went to a retailer event, a retailer summit, and we had an opportunity to speak to different groups of retailers and
Mhm.
talk about the Catalyst Prime line. And my colleague was giving out cards, business cards, and he gave one of his cards to this retailer, and this retailer took his business card and picked his teeth with it right in front of us. Right
We're
in front
hands
of us.
thrown. We're hands thrown because I think that's fair. If a
Well,
punch gets,
listen.
I,
Here's a reality. Our ancestors have suffered much worse
you're
indignities
not
than
wrong.
that,
You're not wrong.
and there is a time to speak and a time to remain silent. So
Mhm.
that was one that always went in the database,
Mhm.
right? And that was a sharp reminder that not all comic book stores are safe spaces for
Truth.
us and our stories,
Mhm.
right? So when I think about safe spaces and how this book will open up exposure to Black owned retailers,
Mhm.
Black founded conventions, show the publishers that are supporting Black lives through their hiring practices, through the stories,
Mhm.
show the creators, right? That is when it really crystallized for me, when I really thought about the safe spaces. So then I became a part of it. And then the third member, another Milestone alumni, he's a journalist and a designer. His name is George Carmona the third.
Mhm.
And the three of us came together and we worked on this for 4 months, like in some crazy thing called spare time, which no one really has,
Right.
and through the holidays sometimes. But you know, putting this together, it was really, again, it's a continuing of the mission,
Of course.
right?
Of course.
And part of what it does, not that this was the primary goal, is that it eliminates the excuses. It eliminates the excuses for publishers to not hire Black people
Mhm.
because they cannot find us,
Right. Right.
right? This is the means through which you can find us now,
There you go.
right? And I expect to see movement towards more egalitarian hiring practices in the future as a
Mhm.
result of this. And this book is going to be an annual program. So we will be putting out a volume every year.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, that's what I'm
Thank you.
talking about.
Thank you so much.
So, obviously, with so much work behind the scenes, do you get to still be a comic book fan? Do you get to still read books outside of work?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And
What
I
are
mean,
some of the
thank
things you're reading these days?
wow. That's okay. As far as Marvel Comics goes,
Sure.
the Immortal Hulk.
Okay. Okay.
is honestly one
Yeah.
of the best monthly comic books they're putting out. And
Mm-hmm.
this is not opinion. This is fact. It is. Right? What Jonathan Hickman and the team of creators have accomplished with the X-Men line
Mm-hmm.
is certainly innovative step in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Insofar as DC Comics, I've checked out a few Future State books here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say that Future State Aquaman is stellar,
Mm-hmm.
is an absolutely stellar comic book that gets you in the feels. In terms of the indie realm, excellence. You can't love comics and not be
Say
reading
that. Say that.
excellence. You
Yeah.
cannot,
Yeah.
right? Because excellence is a story about fathers and sons,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a story about Black magnanimity.
Mm.
The idea that you must use your powers to help a society and help people that don't respect you,
Mm-hmm.
that wish you dead, and consider you lesser than human.
Mm-hmm.
That no matter how much we're beaten down, we get back up and still offer our gifts and still put them in service of humanity. That level of magnanimity is at the core of the story of excellence.
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know,
Beautifully rendered, greatly told, fantastic. I love.
it's
Yeah.
it's quality on every level,
Every level. Yeah.
and the design is amazing,
Yes. Yes, it
right?
is. Yes,
So
it is.
props to those brothers and
Yeah.
all Black creative team. Yeah,
Yes. Yes. From writer, colorist, letterer, everybody.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Color
Absolutely.
all across the board.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so here's another controversial question for you.
Oh,
If
come on, man.
I
It's
gotta
Black
give it. I
Comics
gotta do it.
Universe.
I gotta do it.
We
I
can
gotta
handle
do
the controversy. Let's go.
it. Okay. Okay. So you're building your Mount Rushmore of comic creators.
Yes.
Is there a separation between writers and artists, or is it just a collective four that you would definitely put up there as your Mount Rushmore?
It's a collective four.
Okay. Who are they?
Dwayne McDuffie, Dennis
Mhm.
Cowan, Michael Davis, and Christopher Priest.
Gods.
That's my Mount Rushmore.
Gods. I love it. I love it. I
Yep.
absolutely love it. And your relationship with them has got in so many different ways. These men are inspirational, but you getting to work with them in many different capacities, what is that like to know essentially your idols and be able to have that experience under them? What has that been like?
It's been a gift. I'm blessed. I mean, I was born in 1969. I'm 51 years old, right?
Hey,
You couldn't have you couldn't have told me that I would have gotten to do this. You couldn't have
right.
told me that, you know, a Black kid growing up in the 70s, laughed at and snickered at and bullied would get to operate in the realm of imagination, right? I mean,
Mhm.
in a metaphorical sense, I've been to the stars,
Of course, of course. Oh my God. In a literal,
and this is all beautiful,
yes.
and so um yeah, it's been a blessing. I'm thankful to all four of them, those who are with us and those who are not.
Hmm.
And so the job is to pay it forward,
Of course. Of course.
right? And so, yeah, that's why those four gentlemen, and obviously, when you say Mount Rushmore and it's only four people, obviously our sky is full of stars,
Of course.
right? So I don't mean to diminish anyone, relegate them to a second position, but what those four did, it would not be an overstatement to say that they changed the course of our civilization, that
Hmm.
what they put forth has impacted lives, it's impacted entertainment, it's
Hmm.
impacted culture, and it's impacted people. And it will continue to do that.
Without question.
So that is why them.
I love that. I love that. We got the question as can we put some links, some web links to some of the content that you're talking about? So the guidebook and all of that. Can we put links into the discussion?
Sure.
Yeah, guys, jump in that. Do that.
Yep.
Do that right now.
Yep.
Keith and Jones asked a great question. Has COVID put anything in perspective for you? Has it changed anything of how you view life or what your goals are?
Yes. So two things. One is my mother is Christian, so I grew up with a basic relationship with and belief in an almighty creator. I don't believe the almighty creator is a old white man, but I know there is a God. And when I was sick, God and I had some conversations.
I get that.
Right? So that's one thing. And what that led to was the second thing is that I'm not going to live a day where my anger outweighs my gratitude. Right? And I wake up every morning with gratitude. And even if the day doesn't start good, I'm going to make sure it ends good. And I always wake up and say, okay, what can I do today? Right? So it was a reconnection with the creator, and that gratitude must be the dominant emotional engine through which to navigate any given day.
That is beyond a jewel. That is literal treasure. And throughout this whole conversation, you have literally shared things that have cemented my own mission in life now is to be you when I grow up. Like, that's a bottom line. That is a
you're very kind. Thank you so much.
Nah, Joe, I'm trying to tell you, like, this is the thing, because it is one thing to create excellently. It's another thing to invoke excellence in other people. It's something else entirely to do all of that and yet still continue to build platforms for other people to find their own sense of excellence. And that seems to be what you're all about, previously, and even more so now, that you are more about how you will affect this genre, this business that we all love, and make things better, if not easier, but better for those people that are coming into the game after the fact. And that's something beyond commendable. And if anyone else hasn't said it, thank you for that, for opening those doors, keeping those windows open, and spitting out that truth that we won't know until we've bumped our head so many times that some of us might walk away jaded. You took those shots so we don't have to, and that's appreciated, like very much so appreciated.
You're welcome.
Thank you very, very much. So in the there's another question. Is there anyone out there now currently creating and putting out content now that has you excited? Anything coming out that you are absolutely looking forward to? Great
wow.
question. Thank you.
I mean, there's so many amazing comic books. I'm gonna do some slight self-promotion.
Do it.
As the executive editor of Heavy Metal, we brought on Christopher Priest to write a science fiction series called Entropy, which we basically internally call Green Lantern meets Breaking Bad. And that is something that is really going to illuminate the human experience and talk about how do you make a villain, and who decides what a villain is. I'm very much looking forward to that. April 13th is going to be the publication of MPLS Sound, which is my graphic novel with Hannibal, Taboo, Meredith Laxton, and Tanshu Humanoids. It takes place during the 80s. It is a love letter to the Minneapolis Sound, and it's a story about one woman's quest to create a band to fight against the dominant white male rock system of the time, and to eventually become the band that plays with Prince before the revolution.
Yes.
In terms of projects that are out there by other people, and again, I'm not going to be able to mention all the ones that I'm very much looking forward to. I'm looking forward to The Book of Myrrh by Afua Richardson. She's a beautiful human being, and I'm looking forward to her truth coming out in this story for us. I'm looking forward to White, which is the sequel to Black.
Yes.
By Kwanzaa Osayefo, Jamal Igle, Kari Randolph, Tim Smith III. Far Sector by N.K. Jemisin, Jamal Campbell, and Darren Bennett. Any day that a new Far Sector comes out is a beautiful day. Yes. I'm looking forward to a collected volume so that I can sit down and reread the entire story again. that for me is kind of like those are the immediate starts,
Gotcha.
right? There are so many stories out there, but those are the things that immediately come to mind. Yeah, but there's so many good books out there you can't choose, and that's the way it should be. That should
Yes.
be the status quo. I
Yes.
remember when I was growing up as a kid, all Marvel comics were good,
Mm-hmm.
all of them. That's what comics should be, right? All of them should be good so that there's one for everybody.
There we go. Oh my God, I love that. We only have like time for another question or so I'm going to throw out this one, and this one is insanely personal, so I apologize if it feels too intrusive, but we all
You're
want to
okay.
know, if
Yeah,
you could have any superpower, what would it be and what would you do with it?
I would have to say flight,
Okay. Okay.
right? And I would just look at the world from a different perspective, right? On
Wow.
a day where I'm down or I'm feeling bad, and we're weighed down by our prejudices,
Mm-hmm.
and we're weighed down by this pandemic, and we're weighed down by the media, and we're weighed down by politics, to just be able to go up there and look and just see it all and it's a reminder that this is all amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the defiance of gravity is something that we aspire for with our work, right? There's something that's holding us down. It's holding our spirit down. It's holding our civil rights down. And everything
Mm-hmm.
we do is to defy gravity.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
I would love to be able to fly.
that's a great answer.
If I could have one superpower.
That's no. That's a great like that's like yeah, flying. But no, your rationale and reason for it. That is why you are Joe Illidge. That is without question. It's a truly celebratory like perspective, mindset, the whole nine. And literally, this has already been a huge treasure. I do think we have a solid 10 minutes left. So if there
Cool.
are any questions that people put in the chat before, throw those up, Kyle, if you don't mind, because I know I didn't see them all. But this is absolutely phenomenal. While we wait for that though,
Mhm.
what is a day in the life of Joe Illidge like? What do you do when you wake up, and how do you manage the work that is on your plate?
Okay, so wake up, my wife and I saying good morning to one another. We have a song, we greet each other, and then we start the day. I'll start the day with a bowl of cereal, which will
What's your
then lead
favorite?
to it. Right now it's organic raisin bran by
Okay.
Cascadian Farm. And then it's like, okay, it's usually I'll check the New York Times on my phone, I'll look at certain websites, and then I'll go to the computer and I'll start the work, right? It's like, okay, what's come in?
Mhm.
What new scripts have come in? What new art has come in? And I try to eat like every 2.5 to 3 hours a
Mhm.
day. I'm trying to get 9 servings of fruit and vegetables a day. I'm trying to drink half a gallon of water a day. I try to take a walk every day.
Mhm.
It's beautiful out there, and sometimes you just need fresh air. Um, I try to do some reading every day. If there's something that I don't have the time to read at the time, I'll forward a bunch of articles to my Gmail.
Mhm.
And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I'll sit down and I'll go through all these articles. I just read a cool article with some comments from Malcolm Spellman, who's a
Mhm.
brother and the showrunner and head writer for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And just the way he presented the analogy between the blip in the MCU
Mhm.
and the world dominated by COVID-19, right? And how within that prism, he's going to deal with Sam Wilson as a black man taking on the legacy of Captain America,
Mhm.
right? Like, it just enriches me to read a black man saying this,
Yes.
right? So yeah, that's what an average day is for me. And then, my wife and I always, go to bed and we'll watch something at night, some comedy. Last night it was Dave Chappelle. For a while it was BoJack Horseman, but BoJack Horseman got
Okay.
a little too depressing for her.
But
It really goes there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah,
yeah, but it's usually like a 16-hour day.
mm-hmm.
And again, I start the day with gratitude. I end the day thankful and hoping that I'll wake up the next day.
Man, that's a wonderful, wonderful recipe formula for a very happy life. And Joe, seriously, thank you so very much for spending this time with us, sharing your insights, your wisdom, your stories. This has been an absolute honor. It didn't look like anything else came through, so I'm gonna just go ahead and let us roll that out. Oh, Mike Watson said he got that Black Comics Returns in the back. You already know. You already know. That's right. Yep. Again, another great resource for showcasing Black talent in the American comic book system. It's beautiful. All the work
100%. John Jennings and Damian Duffy have been doing the good work for years. I was honored to have the opportunity to write an essay in the book, and in that essay, I talked about Black people navigating corporate spaces, and that whenever we're able to penetrate the wall, we have to reach our arm back, pull somebody in, right?
That is the way.
So yeah, that's a great book. Love it.
Oh my God. That's, again, an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so very much. Folks, y'all should be following Joe on all forms of social media. If you're not, I don't know what you're on social media for. You're not using it right. Get on your grind and follow this man. Learn from the master, because he's been there, he's done it, and he's willing to share. Once again, I got to give a big shout out to Peep Game Comics for bringing us together, the experience as a platform for hosting this. This has been a great time. I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. Although listening to you, I might have to not say that no more. Like, you the one person I've been like, I'm the hardest working man in comics, unless Joe is he in the room? No? Okay, well then I can say that. But if he's in the room, second hardest working man in comics, I will gladly take that step down. You guys have a great time. Thanks
so much, Victor.
Much appreciated. You guys have a great one. We'll see you guys tomorrow.